Vidya, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. You are the managing director of Dayforce, which was formerly known as Ceridian. And you've got a lot of experience in business. You were the chairman of Business Mauritius for a couple of years, if I'm not mistaken. But for those who don't know who you are, perhaps you can give general introduction on you, your career, and what you do.
First of all, thanks for having me. So my background started in the UK. So in the UK, I did engineering work for all companies and also what is now Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture. Yes. So I came back to Mauritius. And at the time, the whole industry of outsourcing was getting started. So I led probably the first startup in that industry. So that was a long time ago.
Right.
And subsequently, the industry has grown significantly. So I was quite fortunate to be part of growing that industry, engaging with government and policymakers, etc. And today I lead Dayforce, which is a SaaS company, which is an ERP for specializing in human capital management. Most of our customers are actually out of Mauritius,
right,
primarily in the US, in Canada, and also in Europe. It's a large organization. And in my career, I've worked with many countries, whether they are in Asia, or in Europe or North America, and engaged with a lot of different cultures. I had bosses from 5 different nationalities. So I have quite a bit of experience in terms of how you engage with different cultures. And also given the nature of my work sometimes, it can be quite tricky because sometimes you have to move jobs from higher cost location to lower cost location. And how do you actually in a very diplomatic way, handle this kind of challenges. So I would say it's been a rich career. Obviously, I was fortunate to lead Business Mauritius at probably the most difficult time of our history during COVID.
Yes.
But it was great learning, which helps me in my career. Yeah.
Well, I'm really looking forward to discussing with you. As you know, the theme of the podcast is communication in the business environment. The aim really is to explore how we can communicate in a better way in a business environment. And in every episode, I share a bit of my courtroom experience because communication is a big part of what I do as a litigation lawyer. But I like to reflect with a guest from the business world on how that resonates in the business environment. The theme of today's episode is how we respond to being shouted at or insulted in some cases. And I'll ask you in a bit whether that does happen or not. I've got some stats that I would like to discuss with you as well. But before I do that, the reason why I wanted you to be on the episode is because, and I'm not saying this just to please you, but you do command respect in the business environment, whether you know it or not. And I would like to mention this. And I think you referred to the time that you led Business Mauritius was a difficult one, but that's also a way to show your skills and how you navigate those difficult situations. So coming to the theme of the episode today, I usually start with a courtroom story, as I mentioned, and I'll be brief in terms of my courtroom story for this episode, and I'll tell you why in a bit. So the incident I have in mind is when I was in court at some point before a magistrate, quite a senior magistrate, and the courtroom was full. The courtroom was full of lawyers. It's one of those days, and you have a short amount of time to go through different case files. And the opponent, the counsel on the opposing side, was a very senior person. He stood up to make a long statement in court on the case, the stage at which we were. And it's customary in court when your opponent is on their feet for you to sit down, which is what I was doing. When my opponent concluded his statement, I wasn't quite sure if he had concluded or not, then the magistrate started speaking. I didn't realize the magistrate was addressing both of us. At no point I saw her look at me or say my name. So I continued to sit down. It's also customary when the magistrate talks to you for you to stand up. And so there was some sort of misunderstanding or miscommunication there. But at that point, when the magistrate saw that I was sat down, the magistrate raised their voice and said, "Can you please stand up?" But I'll say it in a very aggressive way, or that's how I felt. And almost gave me like a stare of death,
Okay.
One of those looks. And I'll pause here and I'll get back a bit later in our conversation on how I handled it. And let me say, I don't handle these moments perfectly all the time. And I refer to these stories in this podcast, not because I handle them perfectly well, but because of the lessons I draw from them. But I wanted to ask you, how often does that happen in the business environment, that someone shouts or insults someone else in a meeting or in the corridor or in a conversation? We think of the business, especially of the corporate world, as very civilized. But how has that been in your experience?
In my own experience, I would say that probably this is done in a more subtle way. And also the fact that I'm been in corporate world working for global organization with strong policies, it doesn't allow for these kind of things to happen at all, if I may. And sometimes it takes you off guard and say, hey, I wasn't prepared for this one,
Do you think this has changed over time? Because there's so much more material now than maybe 10, 15 years ago on conduct in the workplace, what's acceptable and what's not. There's been big employment law cases against very big companies. There was a $1 million claim against Goldman Sachs about 15 years ago. And one of the arguments used in the case, which I'm not sure was accepted or not, but was that it's part of the banking culture to shout and yell or give aggressive remarks. And so do you think this has changed over time? Was there a time when the culture was a bit different, but because of maybe more awareness today or further campaigns or more involvement of HR consultants and the implementation of policies, that has changed?
Yeah, I would say so. I think at the early days of my career in Mauritius, it was a totally different world. So the boss makes the rules. And I think over time, when legislations are getting applied in other jurisdictions, like in Europe and in America, and if you are working for a European company or a US company, you have to deploy the same policies in Mauritius. And I think this has helped. Harassment used to be common practice in many companies. Today, people are aware that this can be very expensive. So I think in general, people are much more educated. People realize that they have a duty of care to make sure that they don't expose their organization. You have reputational risk and so on. Yeah.
I find it really interesting. There was a survey done earlier this year by Cerebro. I don't know if you've heard of it, a survey in Mauritius. Cerebro is a strategy and communication firm. They conducted a survey on civility in Mauritius. I wanted to know what you think about some of the stats, some of the results of their survey. They found that 80% of respondents observed a marked decrease in civility in Mauritius in terms of an increase in rude language or impolite behavior. And specifically in the workplace, 51% of the respondents felt a lack of respect from a superior. In your experience, and perhaps going back to your days leading Business Mauritius, were these issues that you would see come up in discussions with business stakeholders?
Yes, definitely. I think to a large extent, many companies are not well equipped or able to handle these kind of issues. They don't have people who are responsible for these kind of, to take preventive measures and educate the leadership team. It's true that this survey kind of put some data point on what we felt was already happening. Yeah. And now I think the real question is, why are people behaving this way? And to a large extent, people are concerned about protecting themselves, and they don't want to be taken advantage of. And people, that's human nature. You become aggressive and so on. And I think so. It's getting worse, I would say. And I think to a large extent...
Do you agree with the survey then?
I agree, but I think to the extent of what the data says, I was a bit surprised. You can feel it when you're driving on the road.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can feel it when you're in public places and so on. Yeah. But I think to a large extent, we have the kind of society we have because of the leaders that we have in the country. I think if the leaders had kind of led by example, be very careful about the kind of language we use and how we attack opponents, whether you're in politics or otherwise, I think this will set the right benchmark for the country. And unfortunately, there is not that benchmark, and people feel that everything is feasible. You can do whatever you want. And I hope the policymakers and people in general take this survey seriously and see where are the things being broken down. Yeah,
I agree with you. In my case with the magistrate, what upset me the most is that this kind of behavior is coming from a senior person in the profession, and they are the ones who should be setting the example for how we behave with one another. It doesn't matter if, the person, if I'm right or wrong, there's always a way of putting a message across and making the person understand. And it's interesting you refer to the reasons that possibly cause this attitude and behavior of people. The same survey looks into the causes of the behavior, and I find it interesting. They say 40% they attribute the reasons to the following: 40% due to poor civility education at home, 18.8% due to individualism or narcissism, which I think goes to your point of this is coming from the top, 14.1% due to the inability to manage emotions, and 12.9% due to political and religious extremism. In my experience, I relate a lot more to two of them, which is individualism or narcissism, especially those who feel they are in a position of power and they feel powerful, that perhaps shouting is a display of power. And the other cause that I relate to is the inability to manage emotions, because I understand even people in top position, especially people in top position, have high stress and sleep deprivation at times, and unfortunately, I think for certain people, there's also a sort of emotional immaturity on how to self-regulate and how to maintain your calm and composure. Some of the materials that have helped me include several books by an author called Ryan Holiday. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's got theory of conserving your fire. Basically, don't waste your emotional energy trying to rebut everything, trying to respond to or react emotionally to everything that is thrown at you. Pick your moments and pick your fights, basically. And he talks a lot about how composure requires discipline. Composure is not a sign of weakness, but it's a sign you develop your ability to remain calm and composed. Would you agree in general with that sort of discipline?
Yeah, I would say that you need to stay calm and composed regardless of the situation. I think sometimes people on purpose will try to say something that will create some imbalance at your end so they can win the argument. Yeah. And I think you need to, regardless of how you're feeling in your mind, you need to show that you're in control, you have emotional control. Because ultimately, very often the conversation, I won't say the argument, because very often conversations turn into argument and then everybody loses. Yes. Is to make sure that you focus on the issue and not on the person. Yeah. So the person is not attacking me. The person has a totally different view of the issue we're talking about. And I think go back again and again on, we are here to talk about this issue, and we're here to seek solutions. And bring back the conversation where we were supposed to be spending the time to talk. Yeah.
You're probably familiar with Robert Greene's work on the 48 laws of power, where it says the more emotional you get, the less control you have over what's happening. But if I can ask, and I think that's a question that's quite commonly asked, isn't there a danger that composure is taken for granted, or it's taken as submission, that it's some sort of acceptance of the shouting? How do you draw the line? How do you strike the balance between remaining calm and composed, but also making the point that you're not accepting this attitude, you're not accepting being disrespected?
I mean, you need to have boundaries, obviously, yeah. But at the same time, I think that it's not, for people who are mature and understand what's going on, a sign of being calm and composed is not a sign of weakness. In fact, it's a sign of maturity. You're in charge, you're in control, you know what's happening, and you understand exactly where to move from where you are.
Yeah.
And if people see this as a sign of weakness, I think where they will start respecting you is when you actually make the point.
Yes.
When you bring the ideas and the transformative conversation with the person, then the person say, hey, I underestimated the person. Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, this is what will win the discussion here.
I completely agree with you. That's why I say I really like the way that Ryan Holiday puts it, that composure is discipline. You have to develop it as a skill. And if I go back to my courtroom story, when the magistrate basically shouted at me, and as I told you, the courtroom was full on that day, of course I felt undermined, and I felt quite furious, if I can put it very honestly. But the way I handled it, I simply looked at the magistrate, and I didn't apologize. I didn't think I should, but I just did not say anything. I stayed calm, and I remained completely silent. I made eye contact, and I looked at her in a way to say, I'm not accepting this. I didn't have to say anything in words. And it felt like a long minute of silence. It was probably a few seconds, but it felt like a long minute of silence. And then the magistrate changed that turn the next second, and we proceeded with the court hearing. And I think for me, I learned a lot from these situations, because sometimes it doesn't feel natural to just not say anything when you're being belittled, if I can use the term. But I think with time, it's something you learn. And as you say, people respect you because of how you handle it. And the next time I was before the magistrate, I could see there was a different attitude that she recognized. I could have said something that would probably undermine her publicly, but I didn't do it. And I think she respects me for that, because other people might have not have the maturity to understand and handle it in that way. I told you I wanted to talk about AI, and that's precisely where I'm coming to. As I said, it takes a lot of discipline to develop your composure, your calmness, how you handle different situations. To be honest with you, today when I get an email that infuriates me, I draft my response, I put it in ChatGPT, and I say, can you please turn it down for me? And how do you see... I mean, of course, I could have spent the time and the energy to think about it, and that would have developed my discipline a bit more. But how do you see communication evolving in that way? And by that, I mean, is AI helping us to communicate better, or is it giving us a quick fix, and it takes away the discipline that we need to develop in communication?
Yeah, I would say two things. I think first is, I talk a lot about human-centric AI first company. This is who we aspire to be. Yeah. So they need to be the human aspect connected with the AI. Second is, do you want AI to be your master or your servant? And I think this is the position. To your example, AI should not actually be your master in the sense that, hey, you know what, this is what, but at the end of the day, you have the final word kind of thing. I think we need to use AI as a tool without losing our individuality, our identity. And I think, and unfortunately, with the power of AI, it can actually do a lot of this. Yeah. So people lose control, who they are, how they communicate. And sometimes people can get emails from you, and it's not you, it's ChatGPT who's actually talking to the person. And then over time, you either don't recognize who you are, or people think you're a different person. Yeah. And I think AI is good, but at the end of the day, it's in the hands of who,
right,
to make it either something that is virtuous or something that is going to be destructive. It's a big debate, yeah. But to your point, I think it's so new. It's now that it's starting to impact people. People are playing with it, but it's true that through education, we need to make sure. It's like the students, yeah. The students are responding to all these papers. The teacher think, hey, this guy has mastered it all, yeah. But maybe not, or maybe never. And I think this is where we have to change our approach when we use it, yeah.
I agree with you. It's definitely a debate, because you can't not make use of it, because it's a great tool. And how do you master it in a way that you're not overusing it or over relying on it. Someone in your position has had years, decades of experience, and you've been able to discipline yourself in the way you communicate over those years. Let's talk about, someone who's growing up with ChatGPT and other AI platforms. And it's so easy today to change your tone and change your communication style in seconds.
That's right.
And I don't have an answer to this. I don't know if you do, but the risk I see is that there might be an over-reliance on it, and it adversely affects our communication skills to the extent that we are completely relying on AI to know how to respond. You look at platforms like LinkedIn, for example. It's so easy today to point out what's been generated by, what content is generated by AI and what has not. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing at all. I think it's a great tool. But is there a risk that in terms of communication, we use less, we make less effort to communicate well and over-rely on AI? I know I put it as a question, but I don't have the answer. I don't know if you do, and it's just an observation.
I would say that it's how you want to use the tool. Remember, these language models is being taught by the people.
Yes.
So you can actually get that language model for your organization to go in a totally different direction because that's where you want it to be. And I think this is where you need to have safeguards in terms of how do we make sure that the tool stays neutral, stays ethical to any user using it, and doesn't have its own personality, which is largely influenced by certain people. It's already the case to a large extent. If Google is doing it, their philosophy and everything that they believe in is reflected in their model. And they're trying to steer people in their way of thinking. And I think this is where maturity of people to have the right judgment to say, no, I don't think this is the right way to say this. So I would say that AI will expose the weakness of humans more than it is today. And this is where we need to double down on the human skills. Let AI do a lot of the repetitive, transactional, and highly technical stuff, and let's enhance the humanism of the world.
No, as you say, these are LLMs that basically learn from us humans. I also say that we learn from them. That's because, for example, if I go back to my example of getting an email and I'm furious about it, I just jump into ChatGPT and I say, this is what I want, this is how I want to respond, but can you please make it a bit more respectful and tone it down a bit. I learn from how ChatGPT phrases it, and if I find it okay, I will send it. If I don't, I will prompt it again. No, I don't want this. I want to address this, and this doesn't sound like me or something. But I fine-tune my communication skills by using AI as a tool. And I see this also in customer service. I mean, of course, the bots have been there for a long time now. You're on Facebook or on websites, and you've got a bot that's chatting with you. And I see the use of AI in there in terms of being able to have the emotional intelligence on how to respond to customers, how to chat with customers, and how to respond to their queries. Because I think the style has changed so much. I mean, 10 years ago when those bots started, popping up everywhere, you would ask a question or you'd have to select one of 5 questions, and then the response is very robotic, which it is. Whereas now you have no idea whether you're chatting with a person or AI. And I think businesses benefit from that, because if AI can sense where you're at emotionally, and if you're an upset customer making a complaint, and I'm not going to upset you more, which sometimes the human salesperson or the human customer service agent might do, then it's a great tool for businesses.
Definitely. I mean, we as a tech company, AI is going to be tremendous for companies. A lot of companies have actually said, okay, over the next 3 years, they don't plan to hire anyone more because they believe that they can actually get 30% additional efficiency year over year using AI. And I think these are the benefits. To your example earlier, the reason you can actually discern when you're looking at your emails is because you've got judgment. You build this with experience over time. But somebody who's just now starting their career, they may not have the same background to really discern. Is that a proper way of actually saying things? No, I think AI is going to be, my personal view is that AI will be a huge advantage for society, for individuals, for companies. We just need to make sure that we as humans don't kind of actually say, okay, we'll let AI do everything. I think we need to make sure that we use AI as a servant rather than let it become our master.
But yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And of course, I could keep on talking. I know you've got a busier schedule. If we wrap up, from what I get from you, and I think we agree on this, it's, you're being shouted at or insulted. The best reaction is not an emotional reaction. It's to keep calm and stay composed. We've talked about how AI might help us in doing that, especially in terms of written communication. I think it's looking forward to how that's going to evolve, especially with technology helping us to communicate better now. There's one question that I ask every guest at the end of the episode, and it's, who would you say inspires you as a good communicator?
As a good communicator, I think there has been a few over the years. I would say one of kind of my mentor, if you want, is John Maxwell.
Okay, yeah.
Dr. Cloud. These guys are good in terms of communication, emotional intelligence, etc. And then there are others as well, whether they are past presidents and so on. And I think at the end of the day, role models are very important, because, and unfortunately, we don't have many good role models today in society. But ultimately, conversation is so powerful. I think using the words, you are lawyers, you guys, you are very careful and selective about choosing words that you use. And I think this is not only applicable for the lawyers. I think this should be applicable for any communicator, because you can either destroy a society or a company, or you can actually make it stronger.
And that's the aim of the podcast. It's to draw from our lawyer experience in communication and see how that reflects in the business world. Because as you say, maybe communication is a bigger part of what we do as lawyers, but it's vital and crucial in every organization, irrespective of the industry. Vidia, thank you very much for being here.
It's been a pleasure, Bilshan.
Thanks.